So yeah, a designer here in Brighton, and yeah, so I used to do development. So this talk is going to be mostly on design, a couple of development bits, no code whatsoever, but just a very quick like technical overview, because it's nice to get, you know, like just it's not just visual, not just the tech bits, but it's a mix of everything. Um, so when I started doing this presentation, I actually realized that yeah, I don't know how to skip to the next slide. Uh, no, there you go. I actually realized that, you know, oh yeah, ARKits, just where's Matt? Matt, no, there you go. Just message him on Slack, oh yeah, ARKit in practice. And then when I started doing the talk, I was like, right. So this is actually applicable to not just ARKit, but ARCore as well. ARKit is, not just in case you're not aware, ARKit was revealed this year, a few months ago, and it's essentially augmented reality for iOS. You point your phone at something, you get the video feed, and you can superimpose stuff on top. You know, very, very basic. We're going to see a lot of the examples later in this presentation, so yeah, if you don't know it at the moment, doesn't matter. You probably do, because it's been going around quite a lot. But yeah, ARKit and ARCore, they're really, really similar. So what I'm going to talk about here, it may be a bit, you know, may mention a little bit ARKit, may mention ARKit a little bit more, but it's like a lot. There's a lot of stuff that's applicable to both. So there are four main bits to this presentation. The first one is essentially why is it different? Because like if you're in the community, you've also heard about you know, the Vive and VR and so on and so on. So why is mobile different? What's the big deal? So you can pretty much sum it up to scale. If you look at, you know, very basic, oh, there's actually, right. If you look at, you know, all of the different bits and all of the top main solutions, there's a lot you could compare. But if you look at mobile, and especially ARKit, you can see that you go from 0.5 on the Vive, 0.5 million products, ad sets sold. It's really, really popular. So it's kind of surprising to look at this and you're like, oh, right. 400 million ARKit devices, ARKit capable devices, 23 million ARCore Android, and it's only going to double like 2 years from now. That's going to be triple, quadruple, and so on and so on. Just smartphones are just on a very, very different scale from everything else, like consoles, PCs, and etc. PCs are going down. This is from 2014. They just keep going down, more like a very specific applications, and smartphones just keep exploding. Everybody just has them, and as time progresses, you're going to go from 400 million ARKit to 800 and so on, and 23 million to 500 million and so on and so on. So that's the big thing about mobile AR, that it's quite accessible and it's quite, you know, it can be used anywhere. So yeah, you know, it's quite, there's a lot of opportunity there. In terms of the technical bits, I'm not going to go that deep into the technical bits, no code, no, nothing like that, but I'm going to tell you a few things. Essentially, you've got like 4 components. You could subsplit and so on, but 4 components, and starting with inside-out world tracking, which basically means that it doesn't need any external setup, so you can use it in loads of different places. Coffee shop, you can use it in the downs, you can use it on a road, and so on and so on. And that's also what makes it really nice, because not only mobile, everybody has. Maybe in this room, I'd say 90% of people can use ARKit or ARCore, and also the places. You can use it in loads of different places, unlike the other solutions which you're plugged in. It's changing, but even like, for example, the Oculus has a wireless prototype and a few other bits, but you know, it's just anywhere, anyone, anywhere really. So very quick technical details. The actual positioning, the way positioning works on the phone is actually quite complex, but essentially it uses 2 things. uses the camera, so you have to have in mind that it's good to have good lighting in the area. And it looks at the camera, looks at the feed, and detects a few features, you know, like the corner of the couch, corner of the TV. So if you have like a plain white wall, it's not going to work as well, just FYI. Then it separates those features from the image itself and tries to create a 3D world. And you can also move the phone around. And you can also pin to a very specific area, move the phone around, and it's just gonna stay there, which gives you the illusion of it actually being there, especially when it's a 3D model. And the other nice thing about ARKit and ARCore is that it gives you a light estimation, so it's not that you're putting a square that's a lot brighter in the room. You can actually make it feel like it is there. And we're actually gonna see, yeah, like it is there, like it's there. So technically, later on we're going to go into like rendering bits. I don't know if anyone here does games or anything like that, but technically what ARKit does and ARCore does is that they generate, you know, the 3D room. The background is not going to be black, it's going to have a video, and the camera is just going to be pinned to the phone. So as you move the phone, you're moving the camera. That's pretty much it, instead of using a joystick or anything like that, like the game engines and etc. You're just going to use that. So the other cool thing about these two, ARKit and ARCore, is that they do metric scale, so you can actually get real measurements. Like this is the table over there, and you can measure it, and that measurement is quite accurate. There are other videos where they go around like an actual measure tape, and you can see how accurate it is. So this is really useful to determine, you know, distances and scales, and you can place stuff on the world, and it's just gonna get the right scale, which is quite nice. Then there's plane detection, which is also neat because you can see that it understands where's the floor and where's the table. So if you drop something on the table, it's just going to stay there. And it could be that you drop something on the table and then it jumps out of the table or rolls out of the table. There's a lot of nice stuff you can do with it. There's light estimation that I mentioned earlier. So in here is just trying to show it because there is a dark area, so the model should kind of be darker than if I go into a lighter area, although there's not a lot of variation in here. But you should be able to see that it gets a little bit darker. And that's for intensity and also temperature. So there are a few nice parameters there. And on the iPhone X, on the front-facing camera, you even get direction, light direction. So that's cool. In terms of rendering, you know, you can use whatever you want. There are a few built-in things. Again, this one's a bit more ARKit focused, but you get a few built-in things like sprite kits, 3D, 2D, like raw, whatever you want, Unities and Unreals. So it's not that you're going into a completely new environment. You know, just plug it into these things, which is quite nice. So you can just reuse 3D models and code that you have. Yeah, and for more technical information, there's the WWDC video and loads of other videos that talk about this. But this was really just, you know, quick, high level. Yeah, so I think this is the most important section of, well, these two bits are the most important sections of this presentation, actually. Just because, you know, AR on its own, it's, you know, worthless in a way. You can have a really nice piece of tech, but then you create an aquarium. You know, it's nice to look at it, but it's not necessarily the most useful thing. You're not gonna have like cheering crowd for yes, fish. So yeah, you really have to go at it with intent and find opportunities, like the measuring thing that I showed earlier. If you get the size of this table, real size of this table, you get the trunk of the car and you know whether it fits or not. Really useful when I was like moving a few weeks ago. Or you're just bored and you want a game, but still, you know, you need some intent. This is something fun, or this is a tool, or it's not just throw it out there and then, you know, the sad reality is that people are not going to use it if you don't find problems that actually need solving. So yeah, just a heads up on that, because it's people usually, AR and etc. minority reports and this and that, but take a step back. Um, so yeah, in terms of designing solutions, I'm just going to go very quickly over this behavior model, because it's a really nice way of thinking about, I've got a solution and I've got a problem. Do they match? So everybody, we do something because we've got these components, like the X is your solution. The rest, the M&A being your motivation, like I want to avoid some sort of issue or pain, or I want something fun to do. The ability is basically, you want to do something, you need to do something, but you don't have the ability. It could be time, money, it's too hard to think about it, and so on and so on. So you need those two things, and if you don't have one of them, you've got your triggers, which is a nice way to compensate for lack of them. So if you're trying to sell a solution to someone, and a finance app, something like that, and this person thinks that they don't have any financial problems. I mean, I'm not saying to, so how's your credit? Is it going well now? Yeah, you've got a lot of money. You don't need to pressure and be mean about it, but it's nice to think about showing how their situation, their motivation, and showing how little time they need to actually fix it. So yeah, it's a nice way to think about it. And it avoids things like this. Astimode came out a few years ago with beacons, and everybody's going to be using these beacons, but what's the motivation to A, take the phone out, B, search for the app, install, then launch it? And how do you even know you can do that when you're in a museum or a restaurant or anything like that? And it could be that you don't have a phone. So if you actually think about increasing this motivation and increasing this ability, it's you actually find a much more viable way of putting your solution out there. Just be your worst competitor and think about everything that could fail in your app. Look at see if the problem is real, but also analyze are people actually using the product, and also. Is it actually being used for what I think it is? So it's not just in the beginning, I'm going to research the problem, I found the problem, I'm going to put it out there. This needs like a continual learning process. So you actually need to keep checking what do people use the most or less, and how can I adapt my product. Yeah, so it's essentially really get to know your customers, because for something like MeasureKit, which is the app that I use to measure the table over there, your customer may be this guy, or it could be a family, it could be a lot of people, because really your competitors are not just apps on the App Store. As an ARKit app, you're going to be playing around with physical limitations and time limitations. So you're going to be competing against like a measure tape, essentially. And the winner sometimes may be a measure tape, because it's just the pain to open the app, find MeasureKit, start world tracking. Is it? Oh no, it's too dark. I'm just gonna turn the light on. So yeah, it's nice to think about all of those different components and why would someone use your app, and everything that may fail. So yeah, I mentioned that it removes physical and time constraints, which is a nice thing. But yeah, did I skip something? I probably did skip something. Yeah, it does remove time constraints, but also you can reintroduce them. So you could actually limit an AR experience to a very specific place. So it's a nice way to think about this. You can remove, but what happens if you re-add them? Yeah, so a lot of opportunities. I think I mentioned a couple of them, but there's a lot of opportunities in loads of different areas. And really the only thing you need to do is to think about problems where space and time are the cause of those problems, or the constraints. For example, in retail, there's big issues that, say, if you're buying something that's a bit more higher value, like I don't know, Sonos, it's a bit more higher value. It's you may want to try it out first, see if it fits well, something like that, or even glasses, like I'm going to show in a couple of slides. So there's some anxiety before you buy the product, like does it actually work or is it actually what I want? And sometimes you can alleviate that anxiety. For example, Amazon, they've just released this. You can't see it very well in this background, but essentially you can try out a product in place before you buy it. It's just kind of nice. See if it fits well within the shelf, and then buy it. They released it just before Black Friday because they know anxiety is one of the big issues to actually buying. It's even more important when you're like buying glasses. Buying glasses online. You get people who they're not going to buy it because the return policy isn't good enough for them. And this is a slight deviation. It's not the back camera, it's the front camera on the iPhone X. And Warby Parker, what they've released is essentially a feature within their app where you can point it at your face, and it sees like your face mesh, because it can actually analyze all of those details. And then they measure the distance between the eyes and the nose and etc. And they get they ship you a pair of glasses that fit perfectly. Loads of detail that can be looked into. Right now, this is only for the iPhone X, but it's nice to think about what will come in the future for more phones and more people. Yeah, still in terms of solutions, there's another nice one, which is like you wouldn't think. I mean, I didn't think about it in the beginning. The first thing that comes to mind is ARKit metric scale. I'm going to measure things. Maybe you can, I don't know, do games or something like that. But actually, there's this app called Blocker for filmmakers, where they can place characters in the real world, and just editing, just adjust the size and position, then take a snap here, take a snap there, and change the film and quite a few other properties. And in the end, they get the setting as they want to, and they build a storyboard based on that, and then they ship it over to ship it over. And I think it's quite a nice application because there is a time and space constraint. You actually need to get people there. You need to, for example, you can adjust the light, so you don't need to wait for a specific light. You can actually see how the shadows are cast and make sure that that it's the right time for that scene. So it's quite a nice example. And there's through that, like the camera, the front-face camera on the iPhone X. This is actually a bit funny. But yeah, someone superimposed a character on top of his face. It's quite fake, but it could be real, so you can actually completely replace the face with someone else with a real texture. And it kind of makes you think about what will come next, because you can very easily, I'm not sure if this is something that you've been looking at, but there are also ways to replace voice and simulate voice. Like I could have Barack Obama's voice, and this is something that is being done with machine learning. So it's interesting what you could do there. So yeah, there's also another fun experiment where this guy down here is just browsing Apple Music by doing facial gestures. Yeah, wouldn't use it like that, but next track. But it's still interesting because it might be useful for accessibility. Like accessibility is something that I really care about as well. And for controlling computers and etc., you usually have like certain switches and devices that read small movements in the lips or eyes. And what you can do with this technology is to do the same measurements without external hardware. It's interesting. So yeah, it removes the physical constraints. It can add the constraints, like I said before. In thinking about psychology, like the scarcity heuristic. Scarcity. Yeah, it's just when you think about the psychology of it, you think about the constraints, that it can remove the constraints, but also people value things that are scarce. So if you can add scarcity a little bit more with AR, maybe there is an interesting experience to be had there. It could be an AR game that, say, for kids, at a specific time, something shows up somewhere in the house. so they can go around with their phones looking and then dropping their phone. Um, but yeah, so it's, and then you never know what's going to show up, for example. So yeah, no, a few different ways of thinking about AR. On its own, it's worthless, but stop for a little bit and create with intent. Finally, we're going to look at a few more demos, and think about, say, if you've got an app, is it feature or focus? Because you don't need to go all in the AR, like Warby, Parker, these guys that I've just spoken about. This is a single feature in their app. And like I've said before, on Twitter, this guy was saying that this is the first time I'm going to try them, and because I don't do free returns, but this is something that will make me become a customer. And it's also quite interesting because essentially what's happening here is that the customer is interested, so I've got a new customer. I've got an activation because this will be a new customer. He's aware and he will be using. Then he's going to be, he may be generating revenue, and he's talking to a different user on Twitter. The other user is asking, "Oh, have you ever tried them before? Should I try them?" So good apps kind of don't market them. They market themselves. Not that you don't need marketing, but if you think about the experience, you create the right experience. You hit a nerve like this, like in this situation, and yeah, good apps just spread a lot better. Yeah, there's the Amazon feature, which I've shown before. It's funny because they've got a massive catalog, and you can kind of see what they've done here. You can see the white areas around it, so this is not a perfect 3D model. They just kind of tried to get a shape of it, and then automatically cropped the image. But still, it's still an interesting experience. It's not perfect, but still an interesting experience because of that anxiety again. ARKit, I keep talking about them. They're awesome. For example, that demo over there, it helps you align a painting. So it's not just positioning stuff in the real world. So the other thing about phones is that they've got a lot of stuff built in. On Android and iOS, you've got like square detection. So you stand in front of it, it detects the square, and before that it detected the floor, and then it compares, is the floor square to that, and if not, just move the painting. And they've got loads of other features. Yeah, so it is interesting the kind of stuff that they're doing with it. I had never thought about doing this with AR, but it's nice to to see these variations. Angles, putting markers in specific places and see the distance between these markers, or doing trajectories. As a side note, one hard thing to do with ARKit and ARCore is to do something absolute. So if I launch the app right now and I go around in a circle, and then I launch the app again, that's gone. And I can't share it easily with other people because the position is relative. I started here, I went around, and this circle is relative to where I started. So yeah, that's still a little bit of a challenge to then have someone come in and, oh, the circle is exactly where we've drawn it. There are ways to get around this, but still it's a bit challenging. And speaking of challenges, wow, it's like I rehearsed. Speaking of challenges, I'm just going to go over 4 of them, and starting an onboarding because it's quite a new thing. Like, when can I use AR and how should I use AR? Very simple thing to do is to, if it's a feature, just stick a badge on it, and people will eventually recognize that it means it can interact with it. Like in an app, retail app with AR, you can see this in 3D, like these guys have done. This is essentially a 3D model catalog, and they just added ARKit there because you can very easily play with it instead of downloading, importing, putting it into a development environment, and so on and so on. It's just really easy to see the model and test the model around. So one thing that happens is that whenever you launch the app, it just restarts. It doesn't know where it is when you first started. So what you need to do is to tell people, hey, can you scan the place around so that I understand where the surfaces are, where the floor is. And there are some, I mean, there are possible challenges there, because if you're gonna go, I'm just gonna hide this, if you're gonna go technical, you can say, couldn't find a plane, adjust the tracking or anchors and objects or features or motion detected, and that may be a bit alien for a few people. So as with any other app, the recommendation is to just go with normal languages instead of plain surface, instead of adjust tracking. Like, what does that mean? Just try and move it. And so being a bit conscious about the language is especially important with AR apps, just because how new these terms are. One nice example, this game, it's asking me to look around, and as I look around and it detects more features, there's that progress bar there at the top, which is quite nice. And once it's initialized, it's just, okay, arcade mode. And yeah, then you can start playing the game. So yeah, it's gradual onboarding. Then there's immersion, like even if you know how to use it, if it's a crap experience, so these guys, high quality graphics, good tracking, you can just play around. It detects the planes. I mean, you don't need to worry about detecting the planes, but it just shows how the whole ARKit and AR Core, all of the work they do for you, help to create an immersive experience. But yeah, then there's sound to this. There could be haptics. The phone could vibrate whenever, I know, your base is under attack. Just might be nice to as awareness. You don't need to look at it. And say when you place something, if it plop vibrates, the phone vibrates, it gives you a nice feedback. Okay, that's done. It's placed in the right place, location or area. Yeah, so and then there's interaction, like how do I actually add stuff? This is IKEA Place. After they detect the world, you just tap plus, you get the whole catalog without leaving the app or context, like the tracking, the AR thing is still running in the background. Select what I want, tap it, and I can rotate just using the standard pinch or maybe zoom. But they're the same gestures you're used to. Rotate, drop it, and then you can just walk around it, really. Tap again, relocate, and yeah, so the thing is, it's a 3D world, but there are 2D gestures, so we have to be mindful of that. So as you can see, the table is only moving on the floor. It's not going up and down or changing scale or anything like that. So it's just really as simple as possible for the gestures. And also you can think beyond the gestures. So we're used to, in regular apps, open the app. How much time do I have, by the way? Okay. Just 1 minute, really. Yeah. So yeah, you've got more than gestures. Apps and etc. used to tap, tap, swipe, swipe, pinch, zoom, but this game is it's like a mini golf game, and the way you play it is just really hold your phone. I'm just holding the phone and yeah, throwing the ball around. So there's no gesture or anything like that. It's actually quite physical. And do I manage to get it in? Hurrah! Yeah. So, and the other thing is, because you know the position of the phone, you can actually react to the position. So you could have this kind of scenario where the characters are looking, hey, where are you going? They can detect that the person is moving away or moving closer or even turning around. So there's a lot of stuff to play around with there, with all of that input, not just gestures. Then finally, there's error handling. It could be that, again, it's about the language. If it's too dark, if you're moving the phone too fast, because like I said before, the way it works is that it looks at corners and features and very distinct things, like the keyboard on that laptop. If I move too fast, it's gonna, oh shoot, where is it? So we have to compensate for that, and just excessive motion or actually the other way around. I have no or excessive motion, and instead try and be helpful. Just try and move it slower, which is very easy to understand. And that was it. Lightning fast. So yeah, thank you. And if you have any advice, like slow, fast, more examples, bad text, bad copy, you mispronounce this word or that, yeah, just let me know. Cool.